Yo, what's good, Spirit Squad? It's your boy Dre, and today we're going to talk a little bit more about Modern with Modern Horizons 2. Now, we did get to go over our very awesome, nice-looking Spirits list, which I'll be jamming tomorrow on Magic Online. But also, there's a bit of a new deck that's been featured all over the weekend, and that's going to be Chef Asmo with a bunch of free cards. And there's a lot of work that this card does, and there's a lot of work that this card does. Haha. To that effect, though, this is going to be yet another free busted card from Throne of Eldraine. And the highlight to these Chef Asmo decks is actually Feasting Troll King. Now, for anybody who doesn't know Feasting Troll King, it's a 7/6, it costs 6 mana, but if you sacrifice 3 food tokens, you can actually revive the Feasting Troll King right from your graveyard. So it's basically Hogaak Part 2. You get to use Chef Asmo, she will grab the Underworld Cookbook will discard the Feasting Troll King to make a food token, find ways to make other food tokens, and bam, you have a 7/6 for 0 mana. So that's going to be just one aspect of how this deck goes from 0 to Hogaak very quickly. But also there's a lot of different builds out there. There's people playing Vengevine, there's people playing Hallowed One, and my favorite build, the one that we're going to talk about today, is the one that features a bunch of food and a bunch of Eldraine tokens. So here's going to be a sample deck list for what I plan on looking at, and I will also be playing this on stream for a league just to kind of show it off because I think it's really powerful, and since it's new, it's kind of fun, at least for now. So what's going on here is that we've got 4 copies of Chef Asmo. She's one of the really big highlights of the deck because you actually want her to go and fetch the Underworld Cookbook. But don't sleep on her sacrifice 2 foods ability. It's basically 0 mana, sack 2 foods, deals 6 damage to a creature. Or rather, the creature deals 6 damage to itself. That ability is ultra powerful. Like 6 damage, for reference, is enough to kill a Stormwing entity even when they have a mutagenic growth. That's a lot of damage with one thing. There's also going to be 3 copies of Cauldron Familiar to go with 3 copies of Witch's Oven. Again, additional ways to make food tokens are fantastic, but also just, it's a great way to gain life, to drain your opponent. That way you don't necessarily need to be attacking with Feasting Troll King just because maybe they deal with Feasting Troll King. So you have a non-attacking way to be able to win games too, and that's pretty nice. You've got 4 copies of Gilded Goose to kind of tie the whole thing together with a Mana Dork. You also get to play 4 copies of Mayhem Devil, and this card is the only reason this deck has any red in it really at all. So with Mayhem Devil, there's a lot of sacrificing going on here. We've got a bunch of fetch lands, we've got the Cat Oven thing going on, we've got Chef Asmo, we've got just Witch's Oven with everything else anyway. We've got 4 copies of Mishra's Bauble in this deck. And this is going to be one where Mayhem Devil has the potential to just absolutely wreck a lot of decks. If you're looking at a creature deck and Mayhem Devil resolves in this deck, you've pretty much won that game. The next thing that's going to be super awesome and, again, free, is going to be Oval Chase Devil, or Oval Chase Daredevil, whatever, something like that. Yeah, this card's insane. So when this thing's in your graveyard, whenever you have an artifact at the table, you get to just bring Oval Chase Devil back from graveyard to hand. So this is going to be very free fuel for your cookbooks all the time. It's like super ultra squee. So that's going to be another card that just really needs to be looked out for because there's just way too much 0 mana stuff going on here. And the last creature in the deck is going to be 4 copies of Street Wraith. Now, Street Wraith's sole purpose in this deck is really just to cycle and draw a card, but cycling counts as discarding a card, which allows you to play a turn 1 Chef Asmo. That's pretty much the entire point of playing Street Wraith in this deck. If it didn't cycle for 0, you probably just would never ever have a reason to play it. If these decks start to get out of hand on top of Street Wraiths, remember we can also start playing cards like Fairy Macabre. I don't know whether we are there quite yet with this deck running around, but it's a thing to be aware of and that may be adapted to this deck in the future. So we've talked about all of the artifacts in this deck. We're also going to talk about the one of Trail of Crumbs, and that's just going to be something, again, that just ties the room a little nicely together. The deck wants to be way more proactive than Trail of Crumbs, so you only really want to see one, but it creates a food token, which by itself is good, and you also get to just win long games against things like control decks, because whenever you're doing your Witch Cat Ovens things, you can just turn your extra mana into extra cards, and that's really absurd. So a 1-of is pretty good here, and it may be where we want to play one more in the sideboard, but for now I think 1 is probably the correct number here. And then everything else is just going to be your regular normal lands, right? So we've got a bunch of Jund stuff, but this deck is base black-green, so you get to play cards like Blooming March, which will occasionally just let you have your mana without taking any life or anything. It's pretty much all upside. Speaking of upside, this deck gets to make use of the new Urza Saga as well, and this card does a whole lot of work for this deck. Since you're playing a 3-color deck, I think 2 is probably the right number for this list. If you're playing just black-green and not trying to play Mayhem Devil, then you can probably play as many as 4 copies of Urza Saga, and we'll talk about why this card's ultra powerful. So on turn 1, what you want to be doing most of the time is playing one of your 1-drop artifacts anyway. So you want to be playing the Underworld Cookbook, you want to be playing Witch's Oven, and that way you'll be all nice and set up for future turns. Since Urza Saga taps for colorless anyway, the fact that it doesn't tap for color mana on turn 1, not that big of a deal. Turn 2, or chapter 2 rather, you can tap 2 and tap Urza Saga to make basically a Karn Struck, where it has XX, where X is the number of artifacts you control, but that works out wonderfully for this deck. Food tokens count. You also have 11 main deck artifacts too, and of course it counts itself. So you have the potential to have like 6 6s and 7 7s kind of all the time. It's a really big deal. And the last thing that we're going to talk about with the Manabase is 2 specific lands here. We've got 1 copy of Urborg and 1 copy of Yavimaya. Now, Yavimaya Cradle of Growth is pretty good in a deck like this for 2 reasons. A, it lets you turn your base black deck into a black-green deck that can reliably make quadruple green if you ever need to cast a Feasting Troll King. The second reason that you want to play both of these lands in this deck is because you actually want your Urza Saga sometimes to tap for colored mana, and either Yavimaya or Urborg will allow your Urza Saga to instantly be a black source or a green source, whichever you need. Rounding it out is just going to be 1 forest and 1 swamp, and that way we just get to play around Blood Moon a little bit. But other than that, the mana is pretty stable for what it is. Currently in the sideboard, we're just trying to hedge against things that really can deal with what we're doing, because as of right now, I believe this deck is probably doing the most powerful thing available to the format. So we've got Fatal Push, and that's just going to deal with miscellaneous creatures, of course opposing creatures too, so like you can deal with their Asmos, their Mayhem Devils, whatever they're playing. Fatal Push can deal with it, because getting Revolt with this deck is ridiculously easy. 2 Nature's Claims will deal with things like Rest in Peace, Leyline of the Void, whatever. You do want to have something that deals directly with something that costs 3 or greater, because there will be some people playing Leyline of the Void. So trying to get away with things like Abrupt Decay and anything else that's like CMC 3 or less, probably not going to work out too well for you, so I don't think I want to try that. We've got 2 copies of Nihil Spellbomb and a Soul Guide Lantern, and these are going to specifically be cards that you can not only get rid of the graveyards with, but also you want things that are searchable via Urza Saga. So if you play Urza Saga, Chapter 3 will allow you to go and get Nihil Spellbomb and Soul Guide Lantern, so we want to make sure that we're able to, you know, get our little bit of efficiency there. We want to get our maximum EV out of our cards. We've got 3 Thoughtseizes, and these just kind of tie the room together again. They're really good against control decks, obviously. This deck naturally doesn't really have much game against combo decks like Storm and the Friends, so Thoughtseize will at least do our best to shore up those matchups. We also have 2 copies of Collective Brutality. Again, Burn is good. This deck is not that bad against Burn, even though it's playing things like Shocklands and 3 colors and stuff, because out of the board, we of course get the Fatal Pushes if you want, but yeah, food tokens. You can just sacrifice them and gain 3 life with each food token you get. You don't have to get all cute and do like the different food stuff. Every food token you have has the ability to just counter a whole spell out of Burn. So just make sure that you're aware that, hey, if I'm at like 10, maybe I want to start paying 2 to gain 3 life. But the Collective Brutality certainly don't hurt things. And then Terminate's also going to be pretty good here, because like there will just be creatures that are well, sometimes out of Fatal Push's range that you really just want to deal with, right? So there's going to be like Stormwing entities, and a Terminate cleans that up like just nice and done, and you don't have to think about it again. It also deals with things like random Reality Smashers if you catch anybody still playing Etron. It deals with random Thought Knot Seers, like Primeval Titans, anything that just happens to be, you know, a little bigger than a Fatal Push. You don't want Chef Asmo to be your only out to giant creatures, so we have a Terminate as well. But that's going to be really the deck here. There's a ton of synergy. It's ultra powerful. It's been basically everywhere in all forms all weekend. As I said earlier, people are playing it with Hollow One, people are playing it with Bartered Cow and discarding it to make food tokens. People are playing it like black-green with this. I saw one streamer playing a Sultai build with Emery's and getting the Urza's Baubles out of the graveyards that way. I've seen just black-green lists that instead of playing cards that we're seeing right here, they're not playing Mayhem Devil and they're instead playing like 3 Luris plus a flex spot. There's a lot of stuff that this deck has the ability to do. So once we find one best build, well, we'll address that at that time. But this is definitely going to be something to be on the radar for, and I will be streaming and playing some of this deck too tomorrow being Monday, and that's going to be 12 o'clock noon Eastern Standard Time. So I look forward to seeing y'all tune in for that. But that's going to be our overview of this. So if you like what you're watching here, just make sure to like the video, sub to this channel, and I will see y'all in the next one. As Nikachu would say, subscribe or your next child is going to be named Asmoranomardicadaistinaculdacar.